but we haven't caught anybody on the video yet. So the more likely explanation is that there are little dust devils. These are little small sandstorms that we can see from the satellites, and when they happen, they actually blow the dust off of the solar panels. So if you're sitting in the control room in Pasadena at JPL, and one of these dust storms blows up, you actually see a big spike in the voltage levels coming from the solar panels because they suddenly got cleaned off, and more sunlight is actually getting through to be converted. We have a bunch of orbiters that are in orbit around Mars now. One of them is from the European Space Agency, Mars Express. These are being used initially in order to map the surface of Mars to decide where are we going to put the next missions. For example, the Mars Science Lander, which is more complex than the rovers, is due out sometime like 2011. But something interesting happened to the rover mission. What the original plan was that we would transmit data from the rovers directly back to the big deep space network from the surface of Mars. The data rates available were 28 kilobits per second. They turned the radios on, and after 20 minutes, they overheated. They had to turn them off to keep them from damaging themselves. So not only did we have a relatively low data rate, but we didn't get the duty cycle we were expecting. Then somebody had a bright idea. They said, you know, the orbiters have mostly finished their mapping work, but they have radios, they have programs, they have computers, and they have memory. Why don't we reprogram everything to take data up from the rovers to the orbiter, and then hang on to the data in the orbiter until it gets to the point where it can transmit data back to the Deep Space Network? Well, it happened that there was a separate radio on the rover that could transmit at 128 kilobits a second. It just didn't have very much range, but it could easily reach the orbiter. So now we're transmitting data, after reprogramming, we're transmitting data at 128 kilobits a second to the orbiter, and then relaying that at 128 kilobits a second to the Deep Space Network. So we're getting much more data at a higher data rate than we did in the original design. Well, what you just heard is called store and forward operation, which is exactly how the internet works. So since 1998, a bunch of us, small number, 6 of us, at JPL have been working to design an interplanetary extension of the internet that uses this store and forward idea to do rich networking in space. We started out thinking we could use TCP/IP to do it. After all, why not? And the answer is it doesn't work. I mean, it works okay on the spacecraft, and it works okay on the surface of the planet, just like it works all right on Earth. But when you go between planets, well, the distances between the planets is astronomical. And the consequence of that is that at the speed of light, it can take up to 20 minutes for a radio signal to go one way from Earth to Mars, and of course 20 minutes to come back. The TCP/IP flow control mechanism doesn't work well when there is a 40-minute round-trip time. There's also a little problem of celestial motion. You know, on the surface of Earth, when you tie 2 cities together with an optical fiber, the cities don't get up and run around and change distances. But the planets are in motion. Their distances change as a function of time. And if you're trying to talk to something on the surface of the planet, the damn thing rotates, and then you can't talk to it anymore until it comes back around again. So you have disrupted communication. So we've realized this after about a week or so, and had to design a new suite of protocols that take into account the long delays and the inevitable disruption. Now we're testing those protocols on the surface of Earth now. We're doing it with tactical military. We're doing it with civilian applications. Mobile radios, by the way, are a good example of disrupted and variable delay communication. So I'm expecting to see these delay-tolerant networking protocols show up in commercial use. We're planning to put some tests in the International Space Station at the end of 2008, and we're going to put successive tests farther and farther away on spacecraft that are already there. So what we're hoping, frankly, and this is my last slide, is that as these standards become adopted, that every mission will be launched with these new interplanetary protocols. What that means is that the previous mission assets, if they're available, can in fact be reused to support the new missions that are being launched that are either manned or robotic. So maybe 100 years from now, we'll actually have an interplanetary backbone that spans the entire solar system. But by the end of this decade, at least, a two-planet internet is in operation. So I'll stop there, and I'll thank you for tolerating my delay, and we'll get on with the show.
Szanowni Państwo, zapraszam teraz naszych panelistów.
Just being representative of a mobile company, Vinton, just a question, how do you see the mobile internet in 1 year, or maximum 2 from now?
So that's a really awful question to ask because it's a reasonable kind of time frame when you really should be able to say something. First of all, I'm expecting at least 1 billion mobile devices to enter the market in 2007. There are 2.5 billion now. Some of them will be replaced by the new ones. So we won't have 3.5 billion, but we might have at least 3 billion devices online. And a fraction of those will be internet enabled. In 2 years' time, I would be disappointed if anything less than half of all of the mobiles had internet capability. But I will tell you that my recent experiences, especially in India, where there are about 95 million mobiles, turned out to have very few of them data enabled. Even though the GPRS capability was present throughout most of the mobile services in India, most of the users had bought the least expensive devices that they could. So let me try not to be too prescriptive, and let me ask you what your experience or expectations are. Are we going to have to invent some applications that will drive people towards wanting more online information service in addition to very simple voice communication?
So maybe just answering the question from Vinton perspective, how we see the mobility development in the near future is that we start to work mobile, we start to entertain mobile. Just giving you the example about internet deployment in Poland. To information, Skype and Wikipedia. For Skype, we are number 3rd population after United States and China. So Poland is number 3. In Wikipedia, Polish language overpassed French in February this year. So when you take our history into the perspective, internet development is quite huge. But when you talk about the access to the information, I would say that plenty of the information was strong in your presentation in terms of changing the being passive internet user towards the active internet user, in terms of uploading the information.
That's what you mentioned. You have mentioned producers, because people become
so
producers.
We will start to create the content which will be sent to the internet, either from laptops or from mobile devices, which will be technologically much more capable, like blogs, bloggings, like sharing the information which is interested for me to the community which shares my interests. And I think one of the projects that we run is, for example, that we open the internet page for the end users for their projects or their ideas to be uploaded, how they see the future mobile phone. Because we strongly believe that we as end users will be trying to influence what is really needed and produced.
We know better than designers.
Absolutely. Everyone could be the designer in few years.